in high school you had bands come to school and play. Back in the 70s, there was a band that came to Beverly Hills High School to play. Now, this wasn't just any band. This is a clip from a movie that we're going to talk about. Take a listen to this. It's Father Yod and his band.
We number about 140, give or take a few. And we're looking around for 4,000. Just like you. Yeah. You believe in reincarnation, don't you? You will come again, won't you? Oh, yeah, you've always been here. Yeah, I'm the father you all wanted. Never thought you had, but you do have.
I don't know, for me that was a pretty eerie scene in the movie. It's Father Yod, and we'll get to him in a moment, but the band is called Yahweh 13, and they were at Beverly Hills High School. They couldn't get any gigs at clubs, so they ended up at high schools. But the weird thing was, and you heard it, it was almost like he was recruiting for his cult that was called The Source Family. The Source Family is the title of a documentary that opens this Friday night at Music Box Theater here in Chicago. It's being distributed, by the way, by Chicago's Drag City here in Chicago. And joining us from L.A. on phone is Mary Demopoulos. She's one of the directors. And Jodi Willie, she's in a studio at KPCC. Hi, welcome to both of you.
Hi, thanks for having us.
Okay, you heard that clip that I played, right?
Yeah.
Wow. When it got to that part of the movie, as I said, it was kind of eerie. I can imagine as a high schooler sitting there, maybe you're not paying too much attention to what this gentleman was saying because you're just kind of listening to the music, but it was kind of like a recruiting exercise for him.
Yeah, it was crazy times back then, especially in Los Angeles. I think there was so much experimentation going on that even high school principals were smoking pot and going to swingers parties. I mean, who else would let that happen at their high school?
Okay, that's Jodi. She's in the studio at KPCC. Maria is on the phone in L.A. Let's start with who this gentleman is. His name was Jim Bakker, and Maria, he had a pretty interesting background leading up to becoming father of this cult.
Yeah, he sure did. I mean, he was a legendary restaurateur, but before that, he was in Ohio. He had a very auspicious youth. He was America's strongest boy. He was very much into physical fitness. He joined the military and, was awarded special awards for shooting down Japanese Zeros, and then came out to Los Angeles because he wanted to audition for the role of Tarzan, and he almost got it.
Yeah, there's a picture of him with a loincloth I saw somewhere. and Jodi, Maria mentioned the restaurant which was called The Source, but even before that, I think maybe it was before. He was a judo master, and he was accused of killing two guys, not at the same time, but separate incidents, with a judo chop to the neck, which is pretty bizarre.
Yeah, he was an athlete, and he was, a war hero, but he'd become a judo champion even before the war, and ended up as a judo teacher trainer for the Marines, the Marine Raiders. And anyway, he was a ladies' man, in Los Angeles, and had been in the war, was a very successful restaurateur. But before his first restaurant, he had an altercation with a neighbor in Topanga Canyon who came at him with a knife, and he, in defense, gave him 2 judo chops to the neck and killed him.
Ew.
And that was deemed in self-defense, so he didn't spend any jail time for that. But the second killing happened above the Aware Inn restaurant, and it was when he was having an affair with this television star. He had a lot of affairs with lovely ladies, and her estranged husband was a jealous, wealthy man who came to the Aware Inn to confront Jim Bakker. And somehow he managed to disarm him. He came with a gun and disarmed him, gave him some judo chops to the neck and a bullet to the head.
Wow.
And so in that case, he was accused of, I think, manslaughter, and he spent a few months in jail before he was released.
And both of you have mentioned already that he was in the restaurant business. Not just any restaurant. This was a restaurant on the Sunset Strip called The Source, and he was perhaps the first person to introduce like a healthy, organic type menu to people. A lot of stars would go there. Marlon Brando, it even appears in Annie Hall, that scene where Woody Allen is ordering and he's at the restaurant outside and he asks for something and then mashed yeast. And it was kind of the epicenter for creating this cult, right? Where he would have people come work and then it just blossomed from there, Maria?
Yeah, I mean, not only was it sort of an epicenter for celebrities and Laurel Canyon musicians and the Hollywood community, but young kids would come in and they wanted to be part of the community. I mean, it was a very it was a fun place to work, and it was the scene. It was kind of like the center of everything. So I think it was very appealing, and he had a lot of charisma.
And at what point did he decide to sort of expand this from employees to a family?
After the restaurant opened, it sort of grew. At first, he started having meditations and classes at the restaurant and in the parking lot of the restaurant. And then from there, at one point, it was like, there's so many of us, let's just all move into a house together. So the family was born, shortly after the restaurant.
We're talking to the directors of The Source Family. It's a documentary about the Source family, a cult in the early 1970s. It opens this Friday night at the Music Box Theater in Chicago. Joining me from L.A. at a studio in KPCC is Jodi Willie and then Maria Demopoulos on phone in L.A. A lot of colorful characters that run throughout this documentary. These were people who were part of this cult, and everybody had the same last name. They changed their name to Aquarian, but their first names range from Sunflower to Magus. And there's an interesting character, Jodi, that is really central to this because she provides a lot of the archive footage, whether it's still photography or film or recording, and she went by Isis. And there's an interesting part in the documentary where she talks about how she became enamored with Father Yod and the whole movement, and how she was at that time dating a gentleman whose name is Ron Raffaelli, who was a pretty successful photographer. I mean, he used to do photography for rock stars. And here's a clip of Ron Raffaelli talking about this cult and how he felt about it.
At the time, I was shooting groups like the Beach Boys, Led Zeppelin, the Rolling Stones, the Doors, Jefferson Airplane. You think I'm going to give up my career and my art and wait on tables? She had nothing. She didn't have a bank account. She had given him everything she owned. They were just odd. They were like little automatons, robotic in some respect. They were just odd. They were like little automatons, robotic in some respect, that there was somebody pulling the strings.
We are the sages, reincarnated, up to our own tricks.
There you go, the photographer Ron Raffaelli with his thoughts, Maria, on what the family source was. Now, Isis, how difficult was it for you to access her, and how willing was she to partake in this project?
Well, Jodi had actually published a book with Isis Aquarian, so she had been involved in the project for a long time, and so they had worked together closely. So by the time we started working on the documentary, there was a lot of trust already there established.
Now, Jodi, one of the things that comes through in the documentary is how some of these former members really didn't have any regrets. As a matter of fact, if I'm correct here, I think all of them at one point said, I don't have any regrets. Some of them said, would I do it again? No. But did that strike either of you as surprising?
I mean, for me, I thought it was amazing that they didn't. But on the other hand, after hearing the story intimately and learning about all the extraordinary things that happened during that experience, and how they have integrated into their lives today. It became obvious that it was one of the most meaningful experiences of their lives, and something that occupies a central part of their memory. And so it wasn't surprising, but it is astonishing when you think of everything they went through, that they feel that way. It tells a lot, I think, about the integrity of Father Yod, no matter how flawed he might have been, that the family members are still so loyal to him today. Even Robin, his wife, who is sort of the tragic figure in the film, says to this day, he's the love of my life. You know, if he could have just kept from having those other 13 wives.
Yeah, that's where the documentary, Maria, where it sort of turns dark and people start questioning what's really going on, because he gets into what is described as sex magic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's the first time I'd heard of that.
Yeah, it's all over the internet for those of you who are listening. You can just look it up. But yeah, I mean, they were practicing, ritual white magic, and sex magic was part of that.
And he ended up taking 13 wives.
Yes, I mean, they all had different roles in the family. So, I mean, when they talk about, the fact that they had to share him, it seems like there was a little bit of bickering between them, but at the same time, you'd think there'd be a lot more, because they each had very separate roles with him, and he sort of was able to compartmentalize them that way. So it seemed to sort of work out in a much more harmonious way than you would expect.
One of the things we heard in that Raffaele clip was music. Plays a huge part, not only in this documentary, but in the Source family. Talk a little bit about the role that music played, Jodi.
Music was central to the family's experience, in the same way that Father Yod took marijuana, turned it into the sacred herb, showed people how to forge a kind of sacred relationship with it. He also did the same thing with sex. I'm going to show you how to make sex sacred and turn it into this practice. He did the same thing with music, and so music was something that was recorded. It was performed and recorded often in a setting after 3 hours of meditation, breathing techniques, and one hit of the sacred herb. And most of the records were made actually at 6 a.m. in the morning, after these 2 to 3 hours of meditation. And so after all of the chanting and Father Yod talking, the band members would go into the band room and just start tapping into the ethers and performing their music. A lot of the music in the family was spontaneous. There were professional musicians who came into the family with a lot of skills. And there are a couple of albums, there are 9 albums that exist today, like privately pressed records that are extremely collectible. Some of them have the singer-songwriter songs, but after a certain point, Father Yod wanted to go spontaneous, which meant, nothing rehearsed would be played. They would have to sort of channel it all in, kind of like jazz or Sun Ra.
Or like Can, the krautrock band from Germany.
Exactly.
Yeah,
there are many similarities.
Here's a little bit of, this one's called Father Whistling. This was an album put out by Drag City. Take a listen. Okay, some of you might have recognized that little bit of melody that was in that song. That is music performed by the band Yahovah 13, part of the Source family, a cult that occurred in the early 1970s, and it also is the title of the documentary. It opens this Friday night at the Music Box Theater in Chicago. There will be a special opening night presentation, including a Q&A with co-director Maria Demopoulos, who joins us by phone in LA. There will also be live music from Sourcin, a band made up of Chicago area musicians, including members of Cave, Plastic Crime Wave, Sound, and more. And it's funny because in the film, you have some of the musicians almost sort of like criticizing the approach or I guess the entrance into the music by Father Yod, someone saying, yeah, he would start playing out of tune and really, we'd go off this cliff. And then you guys put in a clip of Billy Corgan, who's just praising this music.
Yeah, well, he's one of many prominent, musicians who feel that way about the Source family and feel that, their music stands among some of the very best experimental music from the 70s.
Yeah, I love it. This was happening at about the time, a little after, the whole Manson tragedy and what was going on there. But this particular group, this cult, they were a lot different in many ways, even in the way they looked, Maria. They weren't shabbily dressed at all.
No, they were incredibly glamorous by those standards, and they made their own clothing. I mean, they were, just so exuberant in their creativity. They expressed it in so many ways, and through food and through their fashion. They were incredibly fashion-forward in the way they dressed, and just, having fun with it.
What was the most, for each of you, I'll start with you, Maria, what was the most fascinating thing about Father Yod for you?
Wow, that's a that's a big question. Just how complex he was and full of paradoxes and deep. There was just so many layers to him, and through the process of making the film, we just kept learning more and more about him. Even though he wasn't here to tell us, we could hear it all through the participants' point of view.
How about you, Jodi?
Well, spending 7 years with the material, it's just been a constant unfolding process, trying to understand him because he was so multifaceted and had all these aspects. And speaking to some of the family members after they saw the film, they really liked the film a lot and felt that it was authentic to the overall experience and their experience. But some of his women especially said to me, you got Father Yod's outrageous side really well, but I wish he would have just had a little bit more of the love. He was so immensely loving to us till the end, and he had this great feminine side to him and sense of humor, and I knew he had that, but I didn't realize that it was just quite so prominent for them. He was just always joking, and the fact that he was able to maintain a loving way with them until the very end is really, to me, pretty mind-blowing.
Well, we don't want to give away the ending, but one thing that came through for me is that despite this Source family being described as a cult, certainly no Jim Jones or Charlie Manson. That is for sure. The film is called The Source Family. It opens this Friday night at the Music Box Theater in Chicago. And Maria Demopoulos will be there to take your questions. She'll have some answers for you. She joined me by phone from L.A., Jodi Willie from the studios in KPCC. And thanks for checking in. It's a great piece of work.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much.
And that music that you're hearing is from the band, Yahweh 13. And a lot of people really digging that music today, not only Billy Corgan. I'm Tony Sarabia. It's been The Morning Shift.